take a look at the different pillars. Start with the guest experience, understanding what's important to an operator, understanding what's important to a club, really understanding how you define success within your organization, really what that guest experience looks like. The next step, we move into strategy. So from a strategy standpoint, strategy is really how we're going to go about accomplishing that guest experience, right? So as you define your guest experience, I'm going to help you implement the strategy to figure out how to get to where you want to be on the strategy, on the experience side. And then the final pillar is design. So again, hospitality, strategy, and design. Design is an intentional outcome of the first two phases. So whether we're designing a menu, or whether we're designing a food service space, or whether we're designing a concept for somebody, all comes from the first couple of steps. We like to say at Real Food that we go slower in the beginning to go faster in the end. Ask a lot of questions, really try to understand what the client or what the guest folking experience is going to be. Everything builds from there. Great thing about Real Food is we speak two languages. Half of the company is design focused, the other half of the company is operations focused. And by that I mean design, we have a full design department. Architectural, they work with it in Revit to work with different operators on designing a food service space. You want to have a kitchen built and designed, we help you do that. You have a bar or cafe, Real Food helps work with clients to understand what the experience is. As we said, how do we design a more efficient kitchen out there? The other side is operations. This is really my world. So this is a team that I run, and again, it's about half of the business that we do at Real Food. This is anything from I need to figure out what concept I'm trying to open to I need a menu development strategy to help me fix my food cost. Right? So again, taken as a whole, two different areas. They both feed off of each other as we work. We have a lot of clients where we're helping develop a concept, and we're also designing the kitchen as we go. As we said, hospitality is the basis for everything that we do at Real Food. Everything stems from hospitality. Okay. Enough about Real Food. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the industry today. So, coming out of COVID, what, 4 years ago now at least, we're still facing a lot of the same challenges that we faced back then in COVID. I'm going to talk about some of the major categories as we go here, and you'll see some of the different areas that we're going to focus on today. First thing that we're talking about is inflation and supply chain, right? So again, this is all stuff that you guys are facing on a day-to-day basis in your restaurants, right? As operators, in your clubs, in your hotels. Three main areas, as I said, start off with inflation. A lot of interesting data points up there from a survey that they did last year, right? One of the things to keep in mind is inflation is really making an impact on your operations because the cost of everything has gone up, right? Inflation over the last 10 years has averaged, what, 2% or so? And the last couple of years, it's almost tripled, right? So it's running about 6 or 7%. And then even within restaurants, food away from home, so to dine out in restaurants, to dine out of quick service operations, you're looking at about almost 8 or 9% of inflation. That's a pretty substantial number, especially when we're talking about a business that we're all in. The costs are really tight. Margins are tight, costs are probably tight, profit margins are really tight. Hand in hand with the rise in inflation is also your supply chain issues, right? And I'm sure all of you guys are facing supply chain issues, right? It's been getting better over the last couple of years, but it's still a problem, right? We had the big issue with the chicken wings a couple of years ago. We couldn't get chicken wings. Right now, tomatoes and eggs, the price of eggs is 4 times what it used to be. So again, we're still facing significant challenges out there. But how do we write a menu fully understanding that we can't get some of the product that we would normally get, right? So a menu's getting smaller. How do we write menus that take this into consideration and really focus on that, right? Staffing shortages, as we talked about, again, a significant problem within the inflation and the supply chain. A lot of these companies don't have people to drive the trucks, they don't have people to drive the boats, they don't have people to drive the trains or make the deliveries, they don't have workers in the factories. So because of all this, and we'll talk a little bit about how labor impacts you guys, you're seeing inflation through the roof more than it used to be. And like I said, they're really affecting all different areas. If you take a look at the bottom chart we have there, right? Labor's up 18%, utilities are up 12%, occupancy costs another 18%, and general operating costs are up 16% as well. So again, significantly across the board, we get it. You guys are facing some tough challenges out there with inflation. It doesn't seem like it's coming down anytime soon, although it's coming down a little bit. It seems to have plateaued. It's still going to be a significant challenge in the years ahead. Second biggest area that we see a lot of problems is labor. And I know you guys are all facing this, right? So again, in the survey, almost everybody in the survey said that labor is a significant challenge in the industry today. Right? So I'm on a call on a daily basis with the Troon F&B team, country clubs across the country. Every single day it's the same thing. There's not one day that doesn't go by where we don't talk about labor. Right? This club's short a sous chef. This club needs help in the front of the house. This club needs help there. All the clients that come through for Real Food, same thing, right? Everybody looking for help that has challenges. Labor, labor, labor. That seems to be the thing that we hear the most. Right? With labor, you have a couple of different things. One is wages. Wages have gone up. You're averaging about $3 to $4 higher per hour in some areas. Minimum wage has gone up across the country. The tip to minimum wage has gone up as well, right? I'm sure all of you guys see it on a daily basis. What you used to pay line cooks in the city, $20, $21 an hour, you're paying $25, $26, even higher in some places. You walk out the door, you can go past, 4 quick service chains, Dunkin' Donuts, McDonald's, they're paying cashiers $18 an hour. That's hard for you guys. How do you compete in that environment, especially full service restaurants, right? How do you compete with those people, right? Those companies out there that are paying $18 an hour to get their staffing. That's one of the challenges that you have to deal with. The other thing is understaffed, right? Because of the labor shortages. How do you run your restaurant if you're understaffed, right? There's a lot of times that part of the dining room is closed, or you're not open on certain days, or you're closing early at night because you just don't have the staff to do it. Again, significant problem we see across the country. We see with all of our operators, right? So what are some of the challenges that we can think that we can do to help offset that, to help understand how we can impact that labor? And again, with this labor shortage, for those of you who have kitchens in your restaurants, full service kitchens, you'll see that kitchen labor is the most difficult. The unskilled labor that you're getting in kitchens right now is not what it used to be. Before, 4 or 5 years ago, before you had a drain in the industry, you had a lot of people that were skilled, that wanted to work in kitchens, that understood how to produce a menu, do production, do prep. Now you don't necessarily have that. Now you're getting kids a lot of times that don't have the experience, that don't have the skill level to produce the menus that you want to produce. So how do we deal with that, right? That's a significant challenge we're facing out there, right? Because the workforce is shrinking, right, due to less people entering the workforce. How are we going to cope with that? How are we going to face that challenge? So as we get into labor a little bit more on some of the other slides, you start to realize, now understanding these challenges of labor, how do you attract labor? And what are your retention strategies? Now they become a lot more important, right? Because now you're competing with that Dunkin' Donuts that's charging paying $18 an hour. Now you're competing with the other stores down the street that are doing the same, right? And as you see, culture is a lot more important, right? So whereas before, companies could just churn through employees, it's not necessarily the case anymore. Employees care a lot more about how they're treated, what the culture of the company is, what the company stands for, what the company's values are. That's important to people now, especially the people entering the workforce. Millennials and Gen X's or Gen Z's, that's a priority for them, right? Having a good culture in the company that they go to work for and stands for something is really important to those people, right? So again, as you're understanding these strategies going forward, and as you're understanding where the challenges are in the labor force, how are you making sure that your restaurant stays significant? How are you doing this? What benefits are you offering to your employees? What's the rate that you're offering employees? How are you changing your culture around so that you're accommodating these people? And a lot of these, like I said, Gen Zs and millennials that can go down the street and take that $18 an hour job at Burger King or Dunkin' Donuts. They don't necessarily want that, right? You go to work for Dunkin' Donuts, you're just another number in a franchisee's operation. You come and work for somebody's restaurant, an independent restaurant, and treat it like family, treat it a lot more special. So really maintaining that level of hospitality within your organization, keeping your employees happy, keeping them that they want to stay, that's important. That's important moving forward. And it's much more important 4 or 5 years ago. Last big thing that we're seeing is the recession. Whether we're in a recession, whether we're heading for a recession, is really irrelevant, right? The bottom line is that the economy is slowing down because inflation is so high. The government's taking a lot of time to raise interest rates, right, so that they can get people to stop spending as much money, right? So what's resulting in this recession now, or in this slower economic times, is you're getting a lot more people that are unemployed. You get a lot more layoffs in the workforce, right? You take a look at the news in the tech industry lately. Amazon, Google, you name a tech company, they're laying off people left and right? That means a lot more unemployed people in the workforce, right? A lot more unemployed people in the workforce means less consumer spending, right? So getting back to my college macroeconomics days, I'm trying to remember this correctly, right? So less demand, there's less money to spend out there, right? So again, how do you as operators, right, how are you countering this? How are you dealing for the fact that you do have less people spending less money in your restaurants? That's a challenge, right? So again, whether it is a recession or not a recession, the economy's definitely slowed down and it's going to over the next year or so. So again, thinking as operators, right, how do we take that into consideration, understand that that's going to be a challenge, right? How do we focus on that moving forward? The one good thing is that even in a recession, people spend money at restaurants, right? They might not spend it at fine dining, they might trade down a little bit, but they still spend money in restaurants. Again, especially Gen Z and millennials, they don't want to cook, they don't want to clean up the mess, they want to go out to dinner. So you're still going to get people that are spending money, they're just going to spend less of it. So again, if I'm going to a fine dining restaurant 2 times a month, maybe now I go once a month and I go to that casual restaurant a little bit more often than I would have, right? So really understanding that hyper-local is really important right now, right? So the big restaurants, going into the city, right? There's other challenges that they're going to face and ways that they're going to have to cope with attracting that dollar that's out there. But again, remember, people they spend money hyper-locally, and I think you guys have all seen that during COVID, right? The restaurants that have been in the burbs, the restaurants that have been outside the city have fared a little bit better than the ones in the city, right? Restaurants in the city, and I'm sure there's operators out there that are from that, are getting hit the hardest, right? So understanding, again, taking a look at people's spending habits and how do we capitalize on that? How do we make the most of it going forward? Those are the big three. I didn't touch on food costs, which is obviously a huge one. That's going to come up as we go through this deck. That's part of the inflation rising prices that I talked about. But again, I'll put it out to you guys, right? What else are you seeing out there that's a significant headwind for you as a restaurateur and as an operator that we might not have covered here? Anyone? Nothing? You guys are all running great restaurants?
Hold on.
What strategies are you looking at as far as operating in a hospitality included situation?
In a recruiting situation?
A hospitality included, like a no tipping type situation?
Then you hit the last part.
What strategies are you looking at as far as recommending a hospitality included or a no tipping type situation?
Tipping's a different challenge, right? I mean, that's, again, a big issue you're seeing out there, and a lot of companies honestly think this is the wave of the future. I think at some point tipping's going to go away, right? I've been in the restaurant industry my whole life, and this is an issue that sooner or later it's going to come to the forefront like it is now. And sooner or later the restaurant industry is going to have to deal with this, right? You're seeing a lot of bigger companies have done away with it. Some of them brought it back, but a lot of companies have done away with it. So I think you really need to take a look at the culture in your restaurant, what's important to you, what's important to your employees, right? What makes sense and how you're going to do it, right? Remember, if you do away with tipping, you got to raise prices, or you got to raise your salaries and your wages to compensate for that. Now, I think that's a good idea because I think that employees should be getting paid a fair wage out there. But again, we're working in an environment where there's really small profit margins, right? And they're really narrow. Now you start raising wages even more. We talked about in that first section. Now it's going to have a bigger impact on your bottom line. But it's coming. It's going to be a big thing, and I think it's going to be a reckoning for the industry soon.
Do we have any more questions? Welcome back. Keep thinking of more.
I'm not going to go into detail here, but this is just a really quick example on a restaurant that averages about $900,000 in sales, right? As you can see, 2019, you see your associated costs, right? Then due to inflation over 2019 to 2020, those inflationary numbers are the one we pulled off of that first slide, right? Based on the NRI survey. And then you see in 2020 what the reflection of those prices would be in your profit at the end of the day. So you go from a profit of 5% to a profit of negative 12%. Not all as dramatic as that, right? Not all as extreme as that. But again, I'm sure a lot of you out there are feeling the pinch. You guys are all feeling that as everything goes up, prices go up, wages go up, expenses go up. That bottom line is starting to get smaller and smaller and smaller, right? We're in a business of nickels and dimes these days. You got to make money wherever you can. You got to pinch costs wherever you can, whether it's food costs, whether it's expenses and operating costs, whether it's utilities. You got to really take a look at everything as a whole, right? And how do we make money moving forward? We just had a client that we worked in RealFood a couple of weeks ago, local restaurant group, great company. They're doing really well. Sales are fantastic, but they weren't really monitoring the P&L as much as they should be. You know, they came in and they worked with RealFood. We spent some time and we saved them probably $250,000 in savings we found throughout their P&L, right? So again, if you take a look at just little things here and there, they all add up, right? And especially in this day and age where we're talking about all those challenges that we talked about as far as inflation, rising costs, potential recession, every penny counts, right? So for us to take a look at a company that's pretty financially strong and able to come up with almost $250,000 in savings, that's pretty significant, right? I challenge all you to do the same, right? Dive profit and loss statements, dive into your balance sheets, dive into your expenses, and really understand what's going on from an operations standpoint. That's the only way you guys are going to get better. It's the only way you're going to make more of an impact on the bottom line. Understanding and managing your P&L. Okay, now we're going to get a little dry. We're going to get a little accounting 101 here, right? Everybody familiar with what a P&L is? P&L is a profit and loss statement, right? Snapshot of the financial health of a company during a certain period. It tells you how much money you're bringing in, how much money's going out, what you're left with at the bottom line, right? Pretty simple plan. P&Ls are made up of a couple of major areas. One of them is sales and revenue. Next one would be prime cost. Next one would be your operating expenses, and then your net profit margin at the bottom, at the end of the day. We're going to go into each one of these sections in a little bit more detail, right? But again, increasing sales and managing your costs is more important than ever, especially with shrinking profits and higher costs across the board, right? So using a statement on a monthly, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, based budget against forecast, and really understanding where you can make an impact. And as I said, scrutinizing every line on a regular basis is going to make a huge impact. And revenue. Again, pretty straightforward. Sales and revenue is all the money that's coming into your restaurant, right? Pretty traditional ways. It comes in through food sales, beverage sales, takeout, catering, events. All that makes up sales. Sales are still expected to climb, even though we're facing some of these significant challenges. But a lot of that climb is going to come in raising prices, right? So a lot of operators out there are raising menu prices in reaction to the raised cost of goods and the raising inflation that are out there. So sales are still, and they're going to stay steady or at least climb a little bit in the next couple of years, according to the National Restaurant Association. So it's something to keep in mind. So if we have stagnant sales or rising a little bit, right? How do we increase that number even more? How do we impact sales and revenue so that they climb even, right? A couple of things to keep in mind as you're going through this. National trend in dining out has changed, right? You have a lot of people working from home now. You have a lot of people working and that's going to stay. That's not going to be anytime soon, right? So because you have more people working from home, more people working virtually, the real traditional meal periods have kind of gone away. They're blended now, right? So you're working from home, you finish up your meetings at 2 o'clock, you need lunch, you're going to go out to get lunch at 2 o'clock. So that traditional 12 to 2 lunch period where you normally would have had, that's not there anymore. It still is to a degree, but you have a lot of people, like I said, that are working from home and they're eating at different time periods. Later breakfasts, later lunches, later dinners, right? Lines are blended. What can we do to keep driving sales, right? So again, understanding recession's coming, slow down the economy, inflation raising prices. What can we do to impact sales, right? Redefine meal periods. We just talked about a little bit. Maybe there's not a lunch menu and a dinner menu. Maybe you have an all-day menu, a small, compact all-day menu that's easily manageable that runs all day. And you're attracting your work-from-home people. And you're advertising that and getting the message out there. Embrace takeout. This is huge. I know a lot of you guys, takeout percentage of sales go up over COVID, right? Because that was a big strategy. A lot of restaurants relied on that. But again, takeout's not going anywhere. And I'm sure you guys have all seen that. It's probably dipped, but it's still up there. It's still a significant number for some restaurants. Not even quick service. Full service restaurants are seeing the same thing. So how do you embrace takeout? Understanding that it's not going to go away. Well, we can make it easier for the consumer to order, right? We can make it easier for them to order in order for them to pay. It can be easier for them to find our menus online. We can make it easier for them to come to the restaurant and pick their stuff up, right? Do we have a dedicated takeout pickup area in the restaurant? Do we have some type of a locker system or cubbies or something? I mean, you guys have all been in a Chipotle or Panera, you see the cubby system they have set up. Something like that works in all different segments, right? How do we do something like that so that we're really focusing on takeout sales, understanding that it's a big number and it's going to remain a big number, and make it easy for everybody to come and order, right? I know that the delivery companies take a huge bite. I see them all advertising here, Grubhub, DoorDash, all of them, they're all here. They take a big bite. It's almost 20% delivery fees. That's a big number. But you can negotiate with them. It's not always work, it's not always easy, but you can negotiate with them. You can go back to them and talk about that. How do we get those numbers down? I see a lot of municipalities out there right now have been passing legislation that are trying to bring those numbers down. I think there was something in Boston recently. I don't know if that's going to continue, but people understand that this is a problem and they're making an impact on it. How do you attract and keep your customers? We talked about, right? How do we do value adds? again, with this generation and understanding that people are spending less money out there right now, how do you have value adds in your restaurant or on your menu that attract people? By value adds, I'm not saying 2 for 1, but I'm saying things like lunch specials, right? How do we have more lunch specials at maybe a reduced price that I can attract that lunch crowd that I might not have attracted before? How do I do theme nights throughout the week, right? Again, I'm not talking about 2 for 1s. We're not talking about, Domino's type advertising, but can I do Taco Tuesday, right? Can I have a wing special on the weekends? Can I have a Super Bowl special or some kind of football special on the weekends? So again, as people become more price conscious and as people are more concerned about the spending habits and their money, they're going to be looking for value, right? So how are we giving that value to our consumer going forward? Next thing, look for outside the norm revenue opportunities. Think outside the box. This is what we work with a lot of our clients on. Even the clubs, right? We deal with a lot of clubs across the country, golf clubs, and it's the same thing. What are we doing to bring in revenue into the club in addition to the independent restaurant? So what do you have for things out there like whole meal replacement, right? Whole meal replacement, again, big thing, not going away anytime soon, right? You find that with millennials and Gen Z, talked about before, they don't want to cook at home. So how do you make it easy for them to come into the restaurant, pick up, I don't know, a tray of lasagna, a thing of wings, whatever you have, whatever your specialty is that travel well, how do you make it easy for them so that you have a section of your menu or you have a different location where they come and grab that? Is there a small grab and go section in the front where you have a refrigerator that has some packaged goods that people can pick up on their way home, right? Something to keep in mind. Cooking classes, wine dinners, beer tastings, anything like that that drives business to your restaurant, how do we do things like that to get them there, right? Cooking classes are great. We've had a lot of success with clients in the past that have done virtual cooking classes. You don't even have to do it in your space. Do a virtual cooking class, charge a subscription fee, get people to come on a regular basis. Wine dinners, beer dinners, liquor dinners, all that stuff. These vendors will all work with you on that, right? They'll all work with you on the wine, they'll all work with you on the food, they'll all work with you on everything, right? So your cost of doing business on those events like that are gonna be a lot lower. Meal subscription programs. This kind of goes hand in hand with some of the other things we're talking about, right? How do we go back to that grocery model that some of us have adopted during COVID and continue to do something like that, right? Can I order my vegetables from you? So I'm working with a local farm as a chef, I'm working with a local farm. How do I pass that local farm off to my guests, my consumers that are coming in, have them be able to tap into that so that now I can provide groceries for them and I put it through the restaurant and I mark it up a little bit, right? Or is there a subscription meal program where we pay a subscription on a monthly basis, we're sending out meals or we do some type of classes or recipes or anything like that, where again, we can teach you how to make our food at home, creates more opportunity to drive those sales up. Or retail program, right? Can you sell merch? I mean, merch might not make sense for everybody, but can you? I mean, even if you're a higher end restaurant, is there an opportunity to sell, whether it's hats or shirts or something or a koozie, whatever is on brand with your product? How can you sell that, right? How can you make more money off of that? How about retail as well, right? Can you bottle your sauce? Do you have a great barbecue sauce that you can bottle? Do you have a fantastic spice rub, right? That's signature to your restaurant that you can partner with somebody and put into something you can sell on a retail basis, right? Think about all of those things going forward, right? How do we increase sales on an incremental basis? Because as we said in the beginning, it's all about nickels and dimes right now, right? So how much money can we save? How much revenue can we drive? Back to our accounting example, prime cost. For those of you who don't know what prime cost is a really important KPI on P&Ls. All it really is your cost of goods sold, food and beverage, plus your labor, divided by your sales, gives you a percentage. That percentage is your prime cost, right? Biggest area that you can make an impact in restaurants because you have the most control over it, right? A lot of your operating expenses are fixed. Your utilities are kind of utilities unless you hook up with a company that you buy energy in bulk. For the most part, they are what they are. A lot of your other expenses are fixed as well. Biggest impact, 60% or less. Some restaurants that are a little bit higher run a little bit higher, 65%. Fine dining, quick service might run a little lower, 55, 50%. But again, the more money that you can put towards the bottom line and the less of it that goes towards covering cost of goods and labor, the more money you're going to have to pay operating expenses that have increased and actually have over at the end of the day. A little bit about food cost. Food cost is a big cost of goods. Right? Food sales are 70% of your menu sales for the most part. 65, 70% again, depending on the restaurant and segment. Right? How do we make an impact on food and beverage costs? Right? It's a big variable. We can control it as much as we want to, but we can have an impact on it as much as we want to. We talked a little bit about that in the beginning. Right? Understanding that higher food costs and higher beverage costs are a little bit trickier, but understanding that higher food costs is a big challenge. Right? So again, we talked about eggs at the beginning. The price of eggs is 4 times what it was last year. 4 times for eggs, right? So how do you pay attention to your menu? How do you understand what your food cost is and your pricing strategies are relative to that so that you can take that into account, right? To say it's not exciting stuff, but it's something that's really fundamental to your business. And if you want to have a profitable business and you want to have a healthy financial statement, it's something you need to focus on. Day in and day out, you got to be focusing on it. Cost of goods sold, and back to basics for everything sold are the value of the product that it takes to make a menu item or a drink, right? So if I'm selling a chicken parmesan on my menu, all the ingredients that go into making that chicken parmesan, that's my food cost, right? Whatever those numbers are that add up to it. Some people add in bread, chefs will add in bread if bread service is part of it. Some people add in takeout. However you calculate it, bottom line is that you are calculating, that you're understanding it going forward, right? Beverage cost is the same thing, right? All of the ingredients and everything that it takes to go into that beer, right? Pretty simple on that, but if it goes into a mixed drink, right? My Manhattan, how am I making Manhattan? All the costs of those ingredients go in there. As a general rule, 30% of gross revenue goes towards cost of goods. Not necessarily the same anymore. This is kind of blurred as well, right? And again, I would say depending upon your industry, depending on the type of restaurant that you have, this number could be higher, it could be lower. Right? If you're running a pizza place, before the price of eggs went up and tomatoes and cheese and everything else, running a pizza place is pretty simple. Your cost of your ingredients was pretty simple. You should have a much lower food cost because you can sell pizza at a different price, at a decent price. Running a steakhouse, it's a much different story. Steaks are a lot higher in cost. You can only charge so much. You can only charge what the market's going to bear. You're going to run a higher food cost with a steakhouse. So there's no set number on food costs. It really is a variable. It really goes up and down depending on your industry, depending on your menu mix, and really depending on what your target is. We work with a lot of clubs, again, in the club industry, where food cost isn't really important. And I was shocked. Like the first time I read a club's P&L, and they said, we're running a 60% food cost, and I said, what are you talking about? Who runs a 60% food cost? And they say that's what the club wants. The club, food and beverage is an amenity for the club members, money off of dues, right? So even in the club world, where you have a much higher food cost, it's still a target. It's still something that they're working towards, right? So keep that in mind going forward on cost of goods. We talked about food costs, dry goods, meat, seafood, produce, right? 68% of the total, typically about 70%. It's the same thing on beverage, typical things that make up your beverage cost. Usually it's the opposite, right? Something that's a little bit more bar focused, you're going to have a higher mix of alcohol than food. Something a little more restaurant focused, you're going to have a higher mix of food than alcohol. Typically a higher cost margin on beverage as well, right? So again, if you're a bar, wow, I had a little faster there. So if you're a bar and you're selling a lot of alcohol, you're going to have a lower cost because you make much more money on your beverage than you do on your food. Some cost of goods strategies, right? Accurate inventories. Make sure you're maintaining inventories on a regular basis. You're updating pricing. Menu engineering and cost cards. This is huge. This is really one of the most important ones. Make sure that you're costing out your menu on a regular basis. And if you don't have the software to do it, any one of your broadline vendors has that software and can help. Cisco can do it, PFG can do it, US Foods can do it. They all have recipe programs that they can work with you on. But again, cost cards, to understand where your costs are and then use that as a target are really important. Right? Consider smaller portion sizes on menus, right? How do we charge the same amount of money but decrease portion size a little bit so that people still think they're getting the same value, right? But our food cost is going down because it doesn't cost as much to put that item on the plate. Use your P-Mix on a regular basis. P-Mix is your product mix. Pull this right off your your POS system. Right? So you understand what you're selling and how much of it you're selling, right? What makes the most sense to sell? Are you selling a lot of low-cost items? That's great. That's where you want to be. But are you selling a lot of high-cost items? That's probably not where you want to be because that's really it'll impact your revenue, but it's also going to take away from your profit at the end of the day. And really right now we're driving profit.
Hold on, I'll come with I'm stay on the stage, get feedback. I'm coming with the microphone. Who had the question over here? All right.
So with respect to COGS being controllable, like let's say Cisco is your main supplier. So where's the controllable part when, how do I get those down without spending all my time bargain shopping? How can I be in the restaurant, managing the restaurant, and, being out there finding the best prices for inventory?
Unfortunately, you have to a little bit, right? And it's not the answer you're looking for, but really in this day and age, you really have to shop and you really have to make that a priority, right? Because if I can get something lower priced from US Foods and I'm getting it from Cisco, I need to do that. As we talked about at the beginning, it's all about nickels and dimes right now. We're trying to save money everywhere we can. The days 5 years ago where you could do exactly that, and yeah, okay, I know eggs are going to be this, it really doesn't matter because I'm still making money. It's not what it used to be anymore, right? Because your profits are getting pinched over and over and over again. So I'd say that you have to focus on vendor strats. One of the things I think I talk about in here, shop business with multiple suppliers, compare pricing. It's got to be part of your overall strategy, right? So menu mix, menu engineering, cost cards, vendor selection, that's all part of the same strategy that goes towards keeping your costs down. It's not easy, right? Managers on the floor are busy, so it just creates more work for them to do, but keeping in mind, you have a lot of headwinds against you. What are we going to do to really impact that? It's kind of a full encompassing strategy that encompasses everything. Vendor selection is one of them.
Do we have more questions?
So chart that we talked about on high cost items versus low cost items. There's an example of a recipe card. As again, US Foods, Cisco, any one of those broadline vendors has this information and they'd be more than happy to work with you on putting that out. Labor, try to go through this quickly, I know we're already tight on time. Labor is the actual cost of the employees required to generate a level of sales, right? Again, huge variable with employees, huge variable with labor. Immediate impact on the customer experience, most challenging element to manage, right? Take a look at here, $1 on the schedule equals $1.20 on the, right? That extra 20 cents comes from payroll taxes, benefits, all the other stuff that goes along with it, right? So keep that in mind, right? You want to staff in the right places at the right time. Labor challenges, right? Industry is still projected to be about 400,000 employees short of 2013 levels. They're coming back, but they're coming back slowly. And the ones that are coming back aren't at the skill level that we've seen before. Managing hourly labor is a key management tool to keep costs down, right? Changing the way you do business to help offset shortages, right? Changes in service, right? Do we stagger shifts, right? Are we writing a sales forecast and scheduling to that forecast? Are we changing labor as we go? Our managers on the floor monitoring labor every day. We're pulling up those labor numbers from our POS system and looking at where we stand, where we are on labor, where sales are, and making cuts, right? Are we staggering shifts, bringing in staff later? Anything you can do to really try to make an impact here on your labor shortages is huge. Talk about different service models. We switch to more of a hybrid service model, right? Where I don't have traditional servers, busters, and hostesses. Now it's more of a model where I order at the counter, or there's a QR code on the table. The food runner runs food out to me. Again, not for everyone, but really start to think outside the box on your businesses and on your restaurants. How can you incorporate some of these strategies in that'll reduce overall labor? And then when we talked about unskilled labor, biggest impact is the back of the house, right? We have a lot of unskilled labor in the back of the house as we talked about. What can we do to offset that? Okay, again, shorter menus, smaller menus, less complicated menus, right? Smaller menus that you can manipulate and be nimble with if you have to change. Kitchen efficiencies, there's a lot of technology out there. RealFood spends a lot of time designing kitchens and looking at new technology. There's plenty of stuff out there where you can have non-vented kitchens, you can have one-touch technology. There's great stuff, right, that really helps speed up the process in the kitchen, takes down the amount of time, right, that it takes to produce an item, the less amount of labor that you're going to need to get those items out. So quick strategies on labor. We talked about this, forecasting sales, right on down and measuring labor on a daily basis. 5-minute ways to improve labor. Quick note on operating costs. Operating costs make up the remaining part of the P&L. A lot of these are not, they're not variable, they're not controllable, they're fixed, as we talked about utility costs as an example, but there's still areas where you can make an impact here, right? You need to be looking at your P&L on a regular basis, right? Can you rebid out contracts? Can you take a look at merchant processing fees and switch to a different merchant processor, right? How much money are we spending on supplies? We're monitoring that on a daily basis, right? Do we have a budget set up and we're managing to the budget? All those things are important in helping control your operating costs. Some quick notes on operating costs. Quick note on balance sheets, and then we'll try to take a couple of questions. I know we're tight on time. So balance sheets. Everybody understands a balance sheet. Balance sheet shows you your assets and liabilities of the company, right? Assets are things that you own. Liabilities are things that you owe. A couple of quick notes on assets and liabilities. During a recession, during slower economic times, cash is king. The more cash you can have on hand, the better off you're going to be, because you can be flexible, you can respond to crises, and you can be nimble in what you're doing from an operations standpoint. Keep your debt low, right? That's not necessarily a bad thing if it's manageable. Do you have debt that's manageable, right? Do you have debt that's at a lower interest rate where you can use that to help float the company, to help get ahead, but it's manageable and it's not sucking up all of your money. The higher debt load that you have, the less cash we have to pay for things like food and labor, right? It's more difficult to manage. And at the end of the day, if you have debt with a bank, the bank wants their money whether you're doing well or not doing well, right? So again, you have no control over that. So try to keep your debt as low as you can, right? Still maintain a certain amount of debt that you need to have to operate the business. Try to keep it as low as you can, and try to keep as much cash on hand as you can. 3 to 4 months of operating expenses makes a lot of sense. So if there's a downturn in the economy, if something goes wrong, you still have money to be able to float the business. All right, that was really quick, especially at the end. But anybody have any questions? I know we're tight on time, Jen. I appreciate that.
Okay, I'm gonna come over here to your friend over here's got his hand up. We can go a few minutes over, but you're just gonna have to battle Ty Law. I don't know if you
I think
can
Ed's
handle
next
that.
anyways, right?
Actually, well,
I'll take Ed's time.
Ty Law goes next over at
Okay.
center stage, so I don't know if you want to battle him.
So a simple solution is always to increase prices, right? So what have you been seeing on average with your clients in terms of price increases over the last couple of years?
Everybody's increasing them. It's definitely a thing, right? I go out to dinner with my girlfriend, and it's a lot more expensive than it used to be. I think you have to pay attention to what's the market going to bear, right? Understanding that everybody's increased prices, even the quick service places have increased prices, right? What is the market going to bear? You're going to price yourself out of a market, right? I'm seeing $20 burgers on menus right now, which again, 4 or 5 years ago, unheard of. But you're seeing it because you have to, right? So I think it's understanding what the market is, understanding what consumer trends are, understanding what your competition is doing, and not pricing yourself out of the market or out of the competition.
Got a friend over here, sorry.
Prices aren't rising as high as inflation, right? So that's always the challenge. So again, I'm going to say it's individual, depending upon your restaurant, what makes sense for you and what you think you can get away with and what your customer is going to be okay with, right?
Hi, Chris. So we're discussing value adds. I know that the first conversation you have is initial cost and understanding how much you want to pay up front to sell merchandise or to start a cooking show that may not necessarily be virtual. Where does that discussion actually start, and what are you trying to say to anybody as a consultant? Say to your clients, hey, you need to start looking at this area. You need the food costs. You need to look at certain areas.
I'm going to start where I started this conversation with real food. What is your strategy around your guest experience? What are you trying to do? What's the experience that you're trying to put out there for your customers and your consumers, right? And then once you know what that experience is and you understand the strategy, all that stems from that strategy, right? Sit down as a management team or as an ownership team and talk about what's important to you guys. Talk about his 15 strategies to increase sales. What makes sense? What can we execute and what makes sense? Use those strategies. But again, it has to be a collective discussion with the senior leadership, and it has to be focused on the beginning of this conversation, which was, what's the guest experience you're trying to achieve? How are you going to get there?
Do we have any more questions? No? Maybe?
Thank you, everybody. I'll hang out for a few minutes if
Thank you
anybody
so
wants
much,
to
Chris.
grab for individual questions afterwards.
We
Appreciate
learned a
it.
lot. Thank you so much. Again, come on back here at 1:30 for the one and only Ed Doyle.